Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Beanie Baby Rivardo. Today we're going to be going through a 3-round mock draft for the New York Giants, talking about a couple players who we think the Giants could locate and target with those, 3 picks in the first 3 rounds. Obviously, the 11th overall pick is a big one. This is not going to be a trade back scenario. We just did a recent one with Rashad Bateman as the wide receiver that the Giants did end up picking in this trade back in the 20s. Awesome video. It's crushing it. It has over 13,000 views already in less than a day. Go check it out, guys. It's really awesome. I include some clips, as always, so you guys can see a little bit about what he can do at, the premium level in Minnesota, but also what translates to the NFL in terms of route running and his ability to create separation. Not a speedster by any means, but he's very fluid, really good route runner, and he creates separation very efficiently, so that's something the Giants desperately need, and he plays on the outside compared to some of these other guys that might play slot like Elijah Moore, Kadarius Toney, Rondale Moore. But in this scenario, guys, we are going to be talking about a couple really playmakers the Giants can add on offense and defense in the first 3 rounds. But before we dive into this mock draft, Anthony, my friend, how are you doing today?
How am I doing today? I'm doing okay. It's been a little tough day, a lot of scheduling conflicts, blah, 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 whatever. Super Bowl was fun. I had a fun time watching that. The team I wanted to win won. I wish that there were more points scored by the Kansas City offense, though. And I think it definitely could have been a better game. I thought it was going to be a lot closer than it was, but still, Gronkowski scored 2 touchdowns. That's lit. That's super frat. I love that. And I was really hyped to see that. So I'm doing good. And I'll say again, thank you guys for all the love that you're showing on that Rashad Bateman video. It's blowing up. That's awesome. Appreciate all the love and support. I'm ready to talk about this scenario, this mock draft scenario, because we got 2 players in here that I'm a huge fan of. There's 2 of these guys that are in this scenario. One of them in particular, I've mentioned probably like 6 videos in a row, even though he's been completely unrelated to every single topic we've been discussing. Somehow, some way, I bring up his name. So, Alex, what are we doing at number 11 in this mock draft scenario?
So at number 11, as we know, the Giants are going to be looking at a couple offensive playmakers, unless a guy like Michael Parsons falls, or maybe they go Caleb Farley, Patrick Surtain. But in this specific scenario, one of the top 3 wide receivers falls to them, and it's Jaylen Waddle. And Jaylen Waddle is a guy that Anthony really likes. He's a guy that, we've been doing film reviews for. We did one with Chris Entertainer. Awesome video. Go check that out too. And more or less, you see what he's capable of doing with the ball in his hand. Not only is he a premier route runner, but he is able to stretch the field vertically. He's able to do so many things. Like he's kind of has similar traits like Tyreek Hill in terms of those short yardage crossers and ability to create separation. And when the ball is in his hand, he can do explosive things. And that's what makes him so exciting. And really, the pre-snap motion is so important when it comes to a guy like Jaylen Waddle, getting him moving before the ball is snapped, creating that separation. He's probably best aligned as a Z receiver to start his NFL career. I don't want him getting jammed. As we saw Tyreek Hill in the Super Bowl, and let me just put my 2 cents there. I thought that game was crap. I did not enjoy the Super Bowl. I've watched way better games in the regular season than I did in the Super Bowl this time around. I thought the Chiefs just completely crapped the bed. Their defense was awful. The referees were terrible. Everything was terrible in my opinion. It looked like they wanted the Bucs to win, and obviously not having their tackles was tough for the Chiefs. But nonetheless, when you see Tyreek Hill, they pretty much Todd Bowles dialed up a perfect scheme to stop Tyreek Hill. Cover him deep, just drop 2 guys into the secondary, and also jam him at the line of scrimmage. They jammed him. And one thing I like with Jaylen Waddle is at Alabama, they actually use him in a Z spot, so they kind of line him up a couple feet away from the line of scrimmage, which gives him a little bit of room to work with in his release packages. He can actually avoid jam and press coverage and kind of skirt around them and get open and use his elite speed. And that's what he's known for, right, Anthony? That elite speed that Jaylen Waddle has. What would you think about, this guy being selected by the Giants, and what do you think he brings to our offense, especially with Daniel Jones and this offense needing a bit of a boost?
Yeah, when you talk about elite speed, you have to talk about Jaylen Waddle. The guy is an absolute burner. There's a really good chance he runs sub 4.3. That a lot of people have said he could go 4.27. I think he'll probably run a 4.3 flat. It'll be pretty impressive. The dude can fly, all right? He can really move. And the thing with Jaylen Waddle, though, is let's say the Giants do draft Jaylen Waddle. You mentioned it. He's going to be a Z receiver once he gets to the NFL. He's not exactly the guy who's going to step up and beat press coverage all the time and use physicality on the line of scrimmage. Or are you able to get your hands on him at the line of scrimmage? You're likely not, especially if he has that 1-yard cushion from being the Z receiver. So that's really where he ideally will line up in the NFL. And then in terms of his speed, the elite speed that I just mentioned, that's where you see he could really change a team's offense and a whole playing style for the team. If the Giants were to draft Jaylen Waddle, their entire offensive scheme will likely have to change because of it. Because you're not going to continue with these, short, intermediate passing concepts when you have a guy who can literally get halfway down the field in a matter of seconds, right? This is a guy who your offense has to become more vertical when Jaylen Waddle gets onto your team. Like, you have to start airing the ball downfield more often. You have to start scheming ways to get more, deep zone shots in between cover two holes or cover three holes, whatever. This is what Jaylen Waddle is going to bring to your offense. He's going to spread it out. He's going to make it more vertical, and he's going to make defenses key in on him. You're going to have a safety over top. The same way, of course, there are ways to stop this. We just saw Tampa Bay did it to a T with Tyreek Hill, but they had to give up two players just to shut down Tyreek Hill in the Super Bowl, right? And then Travis Kelce was able to eat up the underneath. So even though they lost that game, there was still, pros and cons to that defensive game plan. They just figured we would rather let Travis Kelce try to beat us and Tyreek Hill try to beat us. And that's the thing with the Giants, right? If we had Jaylen Waddle, then teams are going to have to instantly key in on him and say, let's not let this guy beat us. And then that's going to open things up for Saquon Barkley. This is something that when we did the film breakdown with Chris the Entertainer, he brought this up. It was a really good point that he brought up, that when you have Jaylen Waddle and you have Saquon Barkley. Well, to guard Saquon Barkley, you stack the box. That's how you take him out of the game. Defenses were doing that against the Giants because they didn't have that vertical threat, right? They couldn't take the top off of defenses, so they could stack the box, put 9 guys in the box, and actually survive against the Giants. Let's say Jaylen Waddle's in there. You can't do that anymore. You cannot stack the box because then you're just going to let Jaylen Waddle run past you every single play and start racking up all the steep yardage. So now it'll open up where defenses can't key in too much on Jaylen Waddle and they can't key in too much on Saquon Barkley. It's going to open things up for Waddle and open things up for Saquon Barkley. And that, in turn, as these defenses try to key in on Saquon, try to key on Waddle, that's going to open things up for guys like Evan Engram, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard. This is a guy who will change your offense, but your scheme has to change once he enters your offense. You have to see more wide receivers from the Giants, and you have to see more vertical passing concepts from the Giants if Jaylen Waddle is on this team. I believe Daniel Jones only had 43 deep passing attempts this season. That number will have to go up if Jaylen Waddle is on this team. He's an absolute burner, and he really is a truly phenomenal talent. He reminds me of Henry Ruggs. Last year was predicted to be wide receiver 3 in that draft class. He ended up being the first one taken off the board, and I think that's possible that a team will fall in love with him, and he might not make it to 11 because of that. But then I also think about how Jerry Jeudy is one of the greatest wide receiver prospects we've ever seen. He fell to, 15, I think, and then CeeDee Lamb went 17. Sometimes when there's a lot of wide receiver talent, these guys just fall down the board because they know they can get their guy in the second round. The Giants might have one of those top 3 guys fall to 11, which is where Henry Ruggs went last year. Someone fell in love with him and took him at 11, and that was a surprise pick. You could realistically see one of these top receivers falling to 11 for the Giants, and if Jaylen Waddle is there, it would be really difficult for me to pass up on him.
I mean, that's really the thing, and you hit on some phenomenal points here. And the one that I really, really love is the allocation of defenders to specific players. The Giants didn't have anybody last year that opposing defenses said, we're going to allocate 2 players to stop this guy. Even though Wayne Gallman had a few good performances, no defense was saying we're intimidated by Wayne Gallman. Nobody was saying we're intimidated by Darius Slayton. Nobody said we're intimidated by even Sterling Shepard. They just manned up across the board. But when you have Saquon Barkley, he demands that you stack the box and use those linebackers and safeties to maintain the run game and really not let those big chunk yardage plays, just kind of pile up, because Saquon can do that to you. And then when you add a guy like Jaylen Waddle, he's a guy that can push the field vertically, which is actually a really great 1-2 punch, because if you have guys stacking the box, safeties out of coverage, linebackers out of coverage, not only does it allow Jaylen Waddle to dominate that shallow portion of the field on the crossing routes and really where Jason Garrett loves to feed the football, he force-fed the football to the short middle portions of the field, and it resulted in a ton of interceptions to Evan Engram. So if you're gonna do that, you need a running back who's gonna command attention, that's gonna force guys to stay in the box. And it's going to allow guys like Jaylen Waddle to really, really open up that middle of the field. And another thing that he does is he really opens up the short, intermediate passing game for Daniel Jones. And the thing about that is when you have a bad pass-blocking offensive line, we saw Daniel Jones, he was releasing the ball like twice as fast in the second half of the season. And because of that, those short yardage plays were super, super important, and they weren't pushing down the field enough because the receivers weren't fast enough to get there. Jaylen Waddle is capable not only of dominating in the middle to intermediate portion, he's not the best intermediate route runner, but he can burn you deep, and he's faster than Henry Ruggs. There's a clip of him racing Henry Ruggs, and he beats him by a hair. So not only is he faster than Henry Ruggs by a hair, but he's also a better route runner. So that just tells you what Jaylen Waddle is actually capable of doing. In addition to that, I want to list off his statistics. I mean, over 6 games before his ankle injury this past season, he almost had 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's pretty impressive. He almost averaged 100 yards per game and 4 touchdowns. He was expected to be the better of the two between him and Devonta Smith. And with that reality, keep in mind that when you're getting a player who actually was projected to be better before the injury than Devonta Smith, who won the Heisman and was one of the best wide receiver players in college history, that is a big deal. That's you shouldn't take that lightly. Look at the injury, in retrospect, and just be like, okay, the injury did hurt his production, did hurt his statistics, but that's not who he is. You're really going for the potential here, really going for what he can do for you and the attention he commands. So with Jaylen Waddle, he is a guy that you, like Anthony said, you have to design plays around him. That's where I kind of get scared, though, because I don't know if Jason Garrett fully knows how to utilize a player of his magnitude mixed with Saquon Barkley. You need someone that's really creative, that's going to really use play action to your advantage, really push the field vertically. And that's kind of my question for you before we move on to the second round. Do you think Jason Garrett can really figure this one out? Do you think if they got a guy like Jaylen Waddle and another receiver like Corey Davis, Kenny Golladay, let's say, one of those guys, do you think he actually can figure out how to make an offense like that work with creativity? Because I don't know if I'm convinced.
Can he? Well, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's in the NFL as an offensive coordinator, so he can, but will he? I don't know. Last time we saw Jason Garrett call plays before 2020 was 2012. We thought that he had a lot of influence over the past 8 years in Dallas, but now that we've seen him call plays for one season with the Giants, we're a little confused as to how much influence he truly had, right? We think that a lot of it was the offensive coordinators who actually stepped in and called plays. They were really running the show over there. That's what it seems like now, especially Kellen Moore in recent years. He's really opened up that Cowboys passing attack, and it's gotten a lot more vertical since Kellen Moore showed up. And we thought that, Jason Garrett would bring a lot of that stuff over to the Giants. Well, he really didn't. He really kept that 2012 mentality, and that's a little bit of a foregone conclusion, right? I don't see teams succeeding with that 2012 playing style anymore. So I don't know. I think, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. He is a Giants coach, so I root for him. I hope that one day he becomes the greatest offensive coordinator of all time just because he has this logo on his shirt and face mask every single game. But I don't know if he really is going to open up the offense like that. I just there was not a lot of vertical passing concepts in that playbook. The times that he used vertical passing concepts, it was very much 50-50. There were jump balls. I'd like to see more schemed open vertical shots, right? And I don't know. We just didn't see them. So hopefully he can make some sort of adjustment. I think that if he gets those players on the roster that you mentioned, he will, because he doesn't really have a choice. He needs to get these guys to succeed and flourish. So I do think that he will. I hope so, man. I hope so, but I cautiously optimistic. Let's say that.
I'll agree with you. I would probably go with cautiously optimistic. I saw some signs of flashy creativity from Garrett throughout the season, but not enough to convince me he can figure out how to manage, injecting Saquon Barkley, Jaylen Waddle, and another playmaker that they signed in free agency. Like, that's a lot of talent to suddenly have to devise a scheme around. And Jason Garrett's been in the league long enough. Look, I'm convinced that he has the experience. Am I convinced that he actually has the creative mindset to modernize this offense, right? That's my biggest concern, is that he takes this offense and doesn't modernize it. He's kind of stuck in old ways and old-fashioned, running the football first, which isn't a bad thing. But, this is a passing attack league now. Anthony hits on this all the time. This is a league that needs to be focused on passing the football. Running the football is great, but, you use that as a complement to your vertical offenses nowadays, because teams are putting points on the board at an astronomical rate. And we are falling behind based on the 17.5 points we did put up per game this past season. And again, a lot of them were against bad teams. The NFC East was absolutely terrible. Well, I think we scored over 20 points. Most of our games were against Washington when that happened. So, keep that in mind. The first round is a great opportunity. The 11th overall pick, there's going to be a great player, a top 10 player that falls to them. Just a matter of who. whether it's Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase, or Jaylen Waddle. I think one of those guys will be there, and whoever it is, the Giants should really heavily consider taking them. So as we move on to the second round, first round is Jaylen Waddle at 11th overall. The second round, you could go a couple different directions here. You could go outside linebacker, you could go linebacker, you could go another receiver. There's so many things you can go offensive guard. That's a big right tackle is a position we might want to upgrade. But for this specific draft, we are going to go with a cornerback, and we're going to go with Asante Samuel Jr. And this is a guy who I keep hearing. He keeps coming up. If you don't know who Asante Samuel is, the guy's a 4-time NFL Pro Bowl cornerback. He's retired now. But Asante Samuel Jr. is the son of him. And if you ever watched Asante Samuel, the guy in his prime was an absolute monster for Philadelphia. He was so freaking good. One of the best lockdown man coverage corners you'll ever see. He was there when Darrelle Revis is around. Those two guys, man, like they just back and forth. Like Darrelle Revis, I think was one of the best, if not the best corner of all time. But Asante Samuel, his name is up in the conversation. So it's important to see this guy is from the lineage of great corners, and he's also has that capability to be a fantastic man coverage corner. And that's kind of where he actually thrives. He's not the best in terms of ball skills, but when it comes to playing man coverage, he can get it done at a very, very high level. He's natural pattern matching instincts, loose hips, quick feet. You can't really separate from him. He is a guy that Patrick Graham would love to utilize and incorporate into his defense. Now, my biggest concern right now is looking at Patrick Graham and saying, okay, they played a primarily zone defense in 2020. And the only reason I think that they did that was because they did not trust the CB2 position, so they had to play more zone. They had to incorporate some more players. They didn't really have their free safety in Xavier McKinney, and their linebackers, weren't the best in coverage. So they didn't really feel comfortable manning guys up because they knew they would get beat, especially with the inexperience. So playing zone was really a workaround. But when Patrick Graham was with Miami in 2019, he had some pretty good cornerbacks there. And this is a guy who played, 50% of the time they played cover one. So they were very much playing a very, very man coverage incorporated scheme. Now, if the Giants decided, okay, we're going to transition to man coverage over zone, which they could easily do if they drafted a guy like Asante Samuel and they had James Bradbury already, they have McKinney coming back, they have Darnay Holmes coming back healthy, I think they could play heavy man coverage and still get it done. They just use extra blitzers. That way they don't have to spend a ton of money on the pass rush position. They can incorporate more guys blitzing. And that's what teams did to the Giants this year. They played primarily cover one, cover zero, and they sent more blitzers and they got after Daniel Jones, and it worked to perfection. So we know it can work because we saw it happen to our own offense. Now, Asante Samuel is a great, great player if you're going to go with the man coverage route. He's not as refined in a zone scheme. But Anthony, do you think that he would be a good fit for us? This is the guy that I kind of looked at in our mock draft for this specific one. I think he'd be perfect, and I think Patrick Graham, his roots are dug into a man coverage scheme. I just don't know if he's going to take it away and go and stick with the zone because of how well his defense did play this past season.
Yeah, I'll say with Asante Samuel Jr., I think there's a lot of intrigue surrounding him based on his name, which I understand. And another thing that I'll say though is he isn't like the biggest guy. He's not, necessarily. I have read about him quite a bit, and I've seen a lot of people say that they project him to play slot in the NFL, right? He did play outside at FSU, go Noles, but he has a really strong chance of being forced to move to the slot cornerback position at the next level based on his play style and based on, his size for the most part. So I guess that's kind of an interesting thing. I'm kind of one of those guys where I think your playing style is more important than your size. I do believe that Darnay Holmes could even succeed on the outside if given the opportunity, because it's really about technique and how you play. But if some of the experts are saying Asante Samuel might have to move inside, that's just something to keep in mind when we discuss Asante Samuel Jr. in the second round. I want to throw out an alternate name for you, Alex. I don't know if you've ever heard about this guy, Ifeatu Melifonwu. I think that's how you say the name. I apologize if that's not how you say the name. 6'2", 212 pounds, balled out at the Senior Bowl, was one of the highest graded defenders by PFF at the Senior Bowl. Received a draft combine invite because of what he did at the Senior Bowl. Absolutely balled out. Very physical, makes some nice tackles in the running game. 80-inch wingspan. Dude's kind of just freakishly built, and he's very rangy, very athletic. But again, projected to be a zone cornerback. So it kind of ties into everything that you were just saying, Alex, with the Giants defense and in terms of, their ability to be very multiple and play a lot of different coverages. They did play a lot of man, but they did play a lot of zone because they were often disguising their coverages. They made it look like man or they looked like cover three, but it was really cover two and all that kind of stuff because that's really how in order to disguise a coverage, you have to play zone. That's how you do it because you disguise one zone and jump into another. And Patrick Graham loves to disguise zone coverages. So, this is a guy, Ifeadi Melifonwu, who actually could be a pretty good fit. He might be that outside receiver, that 6'2" big guy, or not receiver, sorry, cornerback that can stand out there, be physical, help in the running game, and make some nice plays in those disguise zone coverages that we talked about. I saw him do a little bit of some one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl, some man coverage reps. Really impressive. Was jumping on those routes, making some really nice plays. Might have pushed his draft stock up to the first round, but I really think that he will possibly be there at number 43 for the Giants in this round. A guy that I'm really starting to like out of Syracuse. So if you haven't heard of him or you don't know how to pronounce his name, go check him out and correct me on it.
Yeah, I mean, another guy that I've actually started to really like is J.C. Horn out of South Carolina. And the reason I like J.C. Horn is that I think he would fit perfectly into Patrick Graham's scheme. He's predominantly projected as a zone coverage corner, but what I love most about him is that he's so good at jamming receivers. He's really good at press coverage. And I think that you need to have good press coverage corners. What we saw from James Bradbury, I think James Bradbury is an elite zone cornerback. He's able to play man, but he's not the most physical corner. He's really a finesse guy. He's really good with his feet, really great footwork. And he just so finessed like DK Metcalf and some of these really Allen Robinson. He's really good at positioning. JC Horn's a physical, aggressive corner that plays primarily press. He's not the best off-ball cover corner, and that's kind of where I think his weaknesses. But I also think that plays well into Patrick Graham's scheme because when you have a guy that's really aggressive, it's all about mismatches, right? The NFL's a matchup league. When you have guys that can match up against specific players, it makes things a lot easier. And when the Giants, let's say they're playing the Chiefs, for example, you have Bradbury on the outside covering Sammy Watkins. He's playing, zone coverage or he's playing off-ball man. I think when you have a guy like J.C. Horn, let's say Tyreek Hill's lining up on the outside, Tyreek Hill's best, covered when he's being jammed at the line of scrimmage. That's where I see J.C. Horn. I'm not saying he would actually be able to cover him, but what I am saying is against those speed guys on the outside, against guys that really like to take off and are vertical guys, jamming them is the best way to stop guys from getting like downfield and stacking on those go routes. Anthony knows all about that. So with J.C. Horn, if you're playing a vertical offense, which a lot of NFL teams are going that route and going vertical on the outsides, J.C. Horn's a great guy that could fit the Giants mold perfectly because he jams them really well and then he tracks them and he's really good at attacking at the point. When the point of the ball is, just being delivered to the receiver, he's really good at that attack point. Great at pressing and really great in man coverage and zone. The off-ball coverage is where he kind of gets lost in transition. That's something he'll have to work on. But I think, when you have a guy like that, he would fit into Patrick Graham's scheme pretty well because I think they want to get a little bit more aggressive. They like to be aggressive on defense, and I think having a guy like that will kick you in the mouth for all 60 minutes and really play aggressive football as a cornerback. That's somebody you want on your team. So J.C. Horn's another guy to keep your eye on. He might be a guy that falls to 43 for the Giants. But in this specific scenario, we picked Asante Samuel specifically because I think the Giants and Patrick Graham, his roots are built around the man coverage scheme, and I think they want to be able to rush more passers. They want to provide more of a pass rush with different guys, safeties. Jabril Peppers we saw, Xavier McKinney coming off the edge. Blake Martinez. They want to just send as many guys as possible. That's what Patrick Graham is known for. He's known for sending as many blitzers as possible. And when you have cornerbacks who can play elite man coverage, it makes that so much more efficient and productive because it makes it more difficult for quarterbacks to actually target guys in man coverage. So that's kind of why we picked Asante Samuel. But moving on to round 3, Anthony, I'm going to let you take over for your guy because I know you have a lot to say about him and really why he would be a perfect fit for this Giants scheme and why maybe if they replace Dalvin Tomlinson could be a good fit.
Yeah, my guy here, Ayla Mcneil in the third round. Let's really hope that I'm not hyping him up too much and too frequently, that NFL teams are starting to hear my voice, and starting to move him up their draft boards. Because if he falls to round 3 and the Giants, he's on the board when the Giants are picking, you take that card, you write it down, and you send the fastest player that you have to sprint to the podium and turn that card in. You do not allow that guy to slip through your fingers, in my opinion, if Dalvin Tomlinson isn't there. I think a lot of fans are starting to feel feel the feeling that Dalvin Tomlinson might walk away in free agency, right? It just seems like in terms of the money, in terms of how the Giants cap space is structured, it's kind of limited. It seems like there's a good chance that Dalvin Tomlinson does walk away. Well, I feel like I found the perfect replacement if that does happen. Granted, I hope Dalvin Tomlinson comes back, and I would take this guy regardless if Dalvin Tomlinson comes back or not, because I really love this prospect, Ayla Mcneil. But this is a guy who plays zero tech tackle, right? Lines up right over the center, maybe, in between the center and the guard on special occasions, right? This is that guy who lines up in the same spot as Dalvin Tomlinson. That's where Dalvin lines up. Dalvin Tomlinson, we know, is a phenomenal run stuffer, super consistent, doesn't miss tackles, doesn't miss games, and just plugs holes right in the A gap, right there in the middle of the offensive line, right? Ayla Mcneil does those things as well, but on top of that, he adds really impressive pass rushing skills from that position. Now, the zero tech position is rare to find pass rushers there. Ayla Mcneil has the potential to be that holy grail, that zero tech that really can rush the passer. Not saying he is, he's got a long way to go. He's not a perfect prospect. There's a reason he's going in the third round. But man, I said this to Alex the other day on Twitter. I found this video. Ayla Mcneil was running 18 miles per hour on the treadmill. The dude is ginormous. He is way too large of a human being to be running that speed. He's 6'2", 315 pounds, and he can move just different than anybody else that size. Not just the speed, though, not just because he could run fast on a treadmill. He's actually got some pretty decent pass rush moves. He could add more, everything could be better, maybe a little more pop out of the stance or whatever, but he has all the tools right there and a really nice base skill set to develop into like a very impressive pass rusher from his position. And having three pass rushers on the defensive line, we already got Leonard Williams. Let's assume he gets retained. Seems like he will. He's an excellent three-tech pass rusher. Dexter Lawrence, an excellent three-tech pass rusher. Dalvin Tomlinson is getting better as a pass rusher year to year, and he's decent, but Ayla Mcneil has a ceiling where he could actually be the best pass rusher out of all three of those guys, and he would be coming from the position where you would least expect that pass rush to come from. Now, to me, that just sounds terrifying if I'm an offensive lineman going up against that trio of defensive linemen. They can just all line up wherever and just rush the passer. You are always on your toes as an offensive lineman going up against a trio like that. But yeah, Ayla Mcneil out of NC State, out of North Carolina State, as I called it in one of the comment sections. Someone called me out for that, thought it was funny, whatever. Really, I love this guy as a prospect. I think there's a lot to like here. He really has just terrific potential as a pass rusher. And I think that if Dalvin Tomlinson walks away, perfect pick. And even if he doesn't, I would take him anyway, just because I see so much potential there that you can develop into a guy. And I think with Dave Gettleman having his hog molly defensive tackle fetish, this is a guy that he could absolutely fall in love with, just like I have, and pull the trigger on in the third round, maybe even the second, if Dave Gettleman really falls in love with him like that.
You took it out of my mouth, man. You took the words right out of my mouth. Like, really, it's incredible to think, because he is the literal like definition of a player that Dave Gettleman would fall in love with. Like, you think about Ayla Mcneil. You don't normally think about nose tackle 0-1 tech defensive linemen as pass rushers. They're usually the big run stuffers. They're drawing double teams. They're soaking up double teams. The best part about Ayla Mcneil is he can do that too. He is a 6'2", 315-pound massive human being. Dalvin Tomlinson's 6'3", 318 pounds. He's not much bigger than Ayla Mcneil, so you're not trading size for pass rush. You know what I mean? You're still getting a sizable human being that can stuff the run and draw in double teams, but also has elite, or not, I wouldn't say elite, but has above average ability to rush the passer and fill those gaps and exploit those gaps from the interior pass rush, from the nose tackle position, which is very, very rare. That is why he is probably going to, be a guy that Dave Gettleman falls in love with and really targets. And I think, you made a good point. He's a guy I could totally see Gettleman being like, we need him in the second round. He's a guy, let Dalvin Tomlinson walk. We love him. But, this is a guy that comes in, not only is he able to stop the run at a high level, but he's also able to rush the passer. And when you have Leonard Williams, who had 11.5 sacks, you have Dexter Lawrence, I think he had 4 sacks, and you have Ayla Mcneil, who can also produce some sack numbers. You can put up 20, 25 sacks from just those three interior defenders in your 3-4 scheme, and then you have those outside linebackers. You have Carter coming back and Ximenez. Maybe they get a guy in the mid-rounds. Maybe they sign a guy. We talked about Hassan Reddick as a potential option. He might be a little bit cheaper than some of the big guys like Shaquille Barrett. But there's a lot of talent in this draft, and Ayla Mcneil is one of those hidden gems that I think if he was there in the third round and the Giants didn't take him, it would be a massive mistake, because the best part about it is he fits their scheme to perfection. He does exactly what a guy like Patrick Graham wants. He wants to generate pressure from the interior, from this 3-4. And I also think he's able to, move a little bit left or right. I think if they were going to transition to 4-3 and occasionally, he could still play in that 2 tech if they wanted him to and exploit those B gaps. I think he could do it. He has the size, he has the ability, and really they want players to be multiple. The Giants want everyone to be multiple, be able to fill multiple roles and play different positions. And I think having guys who have various skill sets, like a nose tackle being able to rush the passer, that would mean he could fill the 3 tech maybe if there was an injury. They needed him to do it. He can move over and do that if you needed him to. Move Dexter Lawrence to 0 tech, swap those guys, rotate them, create stunts. The Giants were really, really, really successful with stunts this past year. And if you're using stunts with Ayla Mcneil who can rush the passer and exploit gaps, with Dexter Lawrence and Dalvin Tomlinson, you're in pretty good shape. You're going to do some really great things there. You're going to succeed and create production from those interior guys. So I love the idea of Ayla Mcneil. Anthony sold him to me. And he keeps getting better and better and better. And obviously, I'm going to be posting clips throughout this video when these certain players are being mentioned. So keep an eye and watch the whole video. If you're up to this point already, you've seen all the clips, so you're really getting a good understanding of what these guys are capable of doing. And just picture them in blue. Picture them in Giants blue and really utilizing those talents on the field for Big Blue in 2021 because. An important factor to mention is that the cap space is going to be dropping significantly, and teams are already shedding players. Like Patrick Peterson isn't going back to the Cardinals. Xavier Rhodes isn't going to be going back. What is he on Miami now or something? He's been bouncing around. So, these guys, there's going to be teams, and they're going to be shedding cap because ultimately they don't have the money to retain these high-priced players. So expect a lot of corners and a lot of other positional players to be signing one-year deals. The problem is the Giants just don't have a ton of money to spend. So they're going to have to fill some of these gaps with draft picks. Ayla Mcneil is a guy you could put in immediately and expect him to start. Asante Samuel Jr., a guy you could ask him to play and start immediately based on the fact that we have Isaac Yiadom starting last year and Sam Beal and Julian Love. I would put Asante Samuel in there immediately as your man cover corner. Aggressive, he can get it done. And then you have Jaylen Waddle who overhauls your offense and really allows Jason Garrett and those guys to get creative with how they call these plays. So overall, I think we hit on a couple of really important positions here. I think we hit on wide receiver with a playmaker. I think we hit on cornerback with Asante Samuel, a really good man coverage corner with tons of potential. They can always refine his zone abilities. And then you have Ayla Mcneil who can rush the passer. The Giants save a ton of money from cutting Dalvin Tomlinson, letting him walk. They save a ton of money, $10 million per season. They replace that with a guy in the second or third round that's going to be making a small fraction of that. And they can reallocate that money toward Leonard Williams, a wide receiver that can do many different things. So overall, I think we hit on 3 positional groups that really needed some help and will likely need help, and bolstering offense and defense, which is the most important part. You're not leaving out any position entirely. Would you be happy with this, and what kind of grade would you give this draft if they went with this in the first 3 rounds?
Yeah, I mean, if this was how the first three rounds went for the Giants, I'd probably give it at least a B plus to an A. It's kind of hard to grade drafts because you always got to give it time before you can really tell who these prospects become in the NFL. But in terms of what I see from this, like let's rewind to the 2020 NFL draft, right? When they went with Andrew Thomas at number 4, I really liked the pick. I wasn't too crazy about it. He was my third offensive tackle on the board. I liked Jedrick Wills and Tristan Wirfs more. So at the time, though, I really liked the fact that they went offensive tackle. That's what I wanted. Second round, they got McKinney. I was already in love with McKinney. Third round, my favorite guy in the whole draft process, because I watched like 16 offensive tackles, hours of film for every single one of them. My favorite one that I found, because I targeted him in that middle round, was Matt Parrott. They drafted him. So I gave those 3 rounds about an A. Now looking better, I'd probably still give it a B. I think it could have been better. But if I were to look at that 3-round mock draft that we just did, I would probably, want to give it an A, maybe a B. The cornerback position, though, that's where it gets tricky, right? In round 2, because we don't really know who's going to be there, who's not. A lot of these guys might get picked in the first round. They might fall. I mentioned a name. You mentioned 2 names. There's a lot of cornerback options there. But in terms of those positions, I would like to see those positions addressed in that order. I think that's pretty exciting. And Jaylen Waddle, super dynamic. He's one of my favorite prospects that I've watched. And then Ayla Mcneil, I freaking love that guy. So, and I'll preface the Ayla Mcneil thing with, I would love Ayla Mcneil regardless of whether or not Dalvin Thomas is there, because I see such a high ceiling for him. But the only way that I'm happy with moving on from Dalvin Tomlinson is if we replace him with Ayla Mcneil, if that makes sense. I don't want to see Dalvin Tomlinson go. I would like to see him return. But I understand the cap space is kind of tough right now. So if he does walk, I think that I found the perfect replacement, and I really hope that it is Ayla Mcneil. But Now it's that I keep mentioning him and I keep putting him all out there and people start listening. I swear, man, one of these NFL GMs is going to see one of our videos that blows up and be like, dude, Ayla Mcneil, he's right. Let me draft that guy in the second round and totally ruin his dreams for the Giants. We'll see about that, you know? Hopefully that doesn't happen. But yeah, I'll give this draft scenario an A. This is just one scenario that we've come up with. We'll do plenty more of these as we get closer to, it's closer to April, closer to the draft. These draft boards might change a lot by then. Maybe by then, Ayla Mcneil is considered a first round lock. You have no idea how that's going to happen. We got the combine, even though it's really not going to work the same way as it usually does. And we got a lot of pro days. A lot of these players, their draft stocks might rise, they might fall. So this is one scenario that right now in February looks very intriguing. Might not look the same in April, but as we keep going there, we're going to keep making mock draft scenarios. And I'm really excited to see what actually ends up happening at the end of April.
Yeah, I mean, we're really just doing free scouting for Gettleman here, so he can check us out and see what we got to say. But as always, guys, thank you so much. If you stuck through the whole video, hope you enjoyed this mock draft. Let me know what you guys think. Maybe let us know what your first 3 round picks would be. With the Giants selections, and maybe what guys really entice you and think they could be contributors in 2021. But as always, guys, thank you so much, and we will catch you guys on the next video.